Most probably it's not going to be possible to put the price tag of 10 grand on your product, just put it on the landing page and expect the people to buy. Available just to pay maybe a few hundred or a few thousand for this type of the service, you should need to take in consideration that thing as well. And the bigger the gap is going to be between the point A and B, the better the probability that you're going to close the deal. Hi everyone, Ravis today here with you, and today I want to cover what is high ticket sales and some of the things that's included into the high ticket sales, how you should price your offer if you are taking a look and you want to be in high ticket sales, what is the advantages and disadvantages of being in high ticket sales, how to actually sell if you are currently in low ticket sales, how to sell the product. You're going to have some clues on how to do it better. So when to raise the price and what indicates that you can charge more for your services. And eventually at the end of the call, I'm going to give you one tiny trick that's going to help you to collect more upfront cash. So stay with this video and hopefully you can learn a lot from that. So what is actually high ticket sales? So I would define that as a difference between what you are actually selling. If you're selling anything less than $1,000 or euros, so eventually that is a low ticket sales. Most probably that's going to be the webinars, PDFs, maybe some tickets to the events that cost you a few hundred. Basically anything that shouldn't involve the person, actually the real human into the conversation of that purchase. Okay, well, I totally understand that you can still discuss the purchase of the webinar, but most of those tiny sales is being done online, and to sell that things you don't need to, it's not high ticket sales, and it can be sold in the web pages. So, and the products and the services that goes beyond the 1,000, and I would say even beyond a 5, 10 and even 100 grand, things like cars, yachts, houses, courses, masterminds, all of that in high ticket sales. And eventually to make the purchase you need to speak with somebody, and as long as you have a conversation with somebody, you can probably make your sale better or worse. And if you are considering the fact to go in high ticket sales, most probably it's not going to be possible to put the price tag of 10 grand on your product, just put it on the landing page and expect the people to buy. So the next question, if you have decided that you want to be in high ticket sales, eventually you need to price somehow your product, your service, and that's the difficult part, and I'm gonna give you two ways of how you can make the pricing. I would call the one the old way and the other one the new way. This is how I call it, and the old way would be just defining, the resources that you need for that particular consultation. Or let's imagine that my hourly cost is 50 euros, and with that being said, every hour that I'm gonna spend preparing for that meeting with the prospect, actual running, let's imagine that's a sales education, actually running them is gonna take another 2 hours, and then some post follow-ups and whatever. And most probably that's going to be around 300 euros. Maybe I can add something on top of that. And this is the one of ways how I can price my services just based on my hours. While this example is totally okay, while you are not super busy and you're just starting your business, what else you can do? This is the route that you should go. And most probably at the very beginning, it's not going to be possible at all to charge the customers, because nobody knows you and nobody knows what you can deliver to them. It's only a promises and your fantasies that you can do with them. Okay, and the next step, as soon as you have your times comes to the end, you can start raising that hourly price. But the other way is taking a look at the services that you are delivering based on the value that you serve to the customer. Value. And I'm going to give you an example about the sales training. So in this case, let's imagine that's like a 2-hour sales training where you go to the company who's making 100 grand revenue in the new sales every month, okay? And their closing percentage is 10%. And in both of these cases, we do the same thing, okay? Here I go to the seminar, I run it, you know, and eventually we're aiming towards increasing their closing ratio by 5%. Doesn't sound much, but if we're going to take a look at what's their current closing ratio, that's going to be almost 50% on top of that. So with that being said, that company is going to generate additional 50 grand a month straight after my education. If that's the case, I'm not saying that this is like a real life example, but let's imagine like that there's a pathway how you can do it in the 2 hours. Not possible, okay? But eventually, let's imagine that's the case. So at this particular spot, like we have a clear return on investment on that education. So, and we're not talking only about the 1 month, but most probably in a year's time, not most probably 600 grand, and in 10 years, it's 6 million. So eventually, well, what could be the decent pricing if that's the case, and if this is the real thing that you can help the company with, would be exchanging the part of that value that actually you bring to the customer. And if you're going to go to any of the entrepreneurs and you're going to ask like, hey buddy, like would you be up for paying me 25 grand, I don't know, or 30 or 10 grand if I could make 50 grand in the next month for you? I'm sure like 99% of the entrepreneurs is going to definitely pay you 10 grand for the service that you're going to deliver to them. So this is one of the ways how to take a look at that. I understand that in the cases when you don't have a return on investment opportunity, but you have something else like relationship coaching, or you help people to save their relationships. And then there's a little bit different formula that I use to actually calculate the price for that service. And eventually we need to understand of how valuable is that for the prospect and how long-standing actually that thing is going to be. So if I can save my marriage, okay, I really love my wife, but something is going south, and what I can do if I can save my marriage for another 5 years, so I'm gonna just multiply that by 12 months. So we have like a 60 beautiful months that I can live with my wife, and everything is gonna be good, and that's the promise, you know. So, and based on that, like the question is like, how much you would would you be ready to actually save your, like, I don't know, evenings, you have a good relationship partner besides of you, no arguing, no stress, you know, kids taken care of. That costs a lot of money, you know, because even if we want to convert that into money, you know, when I'm in a good relationship, you know, as an entrepreneur, I can be better in my life overall, you know, I can do better things, you know, I can rely on my partner, and that costs freaking a lot of money, you know, and I'm not sure, and it depends on like what's your target audience with whom you are talking. While entrepreneurs most probably would be ready to pay 5 and 15 grand for that, where maybe stay-at-home moms is going to be available just to pay maybe a few hundred or a few thousand for this type of the service. You should need to take in consideration that thing as well. So now let's talk about like disadvantages and advantages of actually being in a high ticket space. So let's start with the disadvantages, and the first big problem, if you are already selling your hours, you know, is taking your mind from the point where you are selling for 100 euros an hour to the position where you believe that you can actually charge the person for 2 grand for your package of services, whatever that includes. Why is that the problem? Because guess what? In my sales experience, I've seen hundreds of salespeople, people who's doing the sales like every day, like for the years, you know, and as soon as they need to take their selling game to the next level where they're actually offering the bigger price for the same service, or they're selling different service but for the bigger price, it's always a little bit tough just to mentally understand, you know, and start presenting that without the fear inside of you, because you know that's what holds you from, that is what messing up with the deal closing. So eventually that's going to be your first problem, just to actually believe it and present it with the confidence to the prospects. While some of you might think that that won't be the problem, but I'm sure after you're going to go to the next 10 or 20 meetings with your potential customers, the first thing that's going to come to your mind as soon as you're not going to close the deals, that the price is the problem. But that's not the problem, okay? The second thing that might hold you back from going high ticket is the fact that you might take a really big portion out of your audience. Audience is money, like your target avatar that you're talking with, and that might be hard for them to commit for that payment, okay? So let's take two examples. I already discussed the sales education offer and the stay-at-home mom, okay? Nothing against the stay-at-home moms. So, and let's imagine that stay-at-home mom, you know, who's living, so eventually when there's a child, you know, and one of the family members doesn't bring to the table as much as money as they were bringing before, like eventually household income shrinks a little bit. And maybe they are saving up some money, you know, and they maybe have put aside, you know, $3,000 or whatever, but when you're trying to charge that person $2,000 for the thing to save their relationship, that's most probably 75% or whatever is the case of their savings, you know. And then let's imagine, just try to imagine whatever savings you are having right now, and if somebody would propose you to fix your biggest problem or one of the biggest problems with almost like 80% of what are you actually having, I think you will be considering at least 1 or 2 or maybe 10 times to do that or not, you know, and you would definitely take the action to solve that yourself. But if we're talking about that company who we could charge, you know, 10 grand for the service to increase their revenue just by 5%, like closing ratio, that's the revenue by 50%, that is only 10% portion from whatever they're making actually on that. And they have a direct return on investment on that. So you can imagine how how difficult in these two cases, how difficult it is to make a decision for the stay-at-home mom compared to the company where that tiny percent is just from a 1 month's income, okay? Of course, here most probably is a bigger competition, and there's like a different competitors who are promising even maybe 20% increase in the closing ratio, but that's another story, not for this video, but you always need to consider these things, okay? So, well, and the benefits of having like a bigger price, those benefits is a lot, because you finally have a source that you can exchange for whatever is necessary for your business, okay? You can trade your money for the time because you are earning more. You're not just exchanging, you know, just to live from the paycheck to paycheck. You trade that for time so you can do the hiring, okay? Instead of doing the cold calls, okay, or knocking the doors and going to the networking events, you can start doing the advertising, okay? Once again, saving the time, maximizing the profits of yours. What you can do, instead of working with 50 clients who's paying, I don't know, 300 euros every 3 months, you can work with 10 clients, maybe make a bigger revenue and make your job better, more impactful, better results. So the next time you approach your prospect, you can tell them that you cannot even increase the, let's take the sales coach as an example. You cannot add like a 50% into the closing ratio, but you can double that, triple that, you know, and then you can change your pricing to 10 grand straight away, you know, or 20 grand, because you can prove it, because you can do it, because you've crafted that one tiny thing. So it's your decision which option at which stage in your business is better. Well, okay, if I already convinced you to start doing the high ticket sales and you need to take your product to the high ticket, this is the next thing that you will need to think about it. How to actually close the deal, because maybe previously you were working just with the referrals, you know. Clients were just coming and going to you, you were just meeting with somebody who was already ready to buy, you know. But when we use the advertising, when we're pitching a higher price to the prospect, we need to understand that there's going to be some kind of resistance. And the best thing that you need to keep in mind to actually make a sale on a high ticket is to create the gap. So there's a prospect where they are at the point A, and there's a point B where they want to be. And the bigger the gap is going to be between the point A and B, the better the probability that you're going to close the deal. How to create that gap? Well, there are certain questions that you should ask in the discovery phase to your prospect to understand whether the client is ready at all to actually take an action, and how serious is the problem where they are, or how big is the goal. And if you have both of them, well, that's definitely a deal. So eventually what we want to understand, for sure, we want to understand what is the problem for the prospect currently they're facing. What is the consequences of the current problem that they're facing? How long is that problem already the problem, and who's been affected by that? And most important question that you should ask in this stage, before you transition into actually talking about the goals, why is that important for the prospect to move right now and solve this problem? And not just listening some vague answers like, well, everybody's here, you know, to grow, and I want to grow, or I want to buy the Lambo. Like, all of that things is a bullshit, because underneath of those layers, there's a more important things that they haven't told you why they're actually in this call. And if you can go in and dig deeper and get to that real why, that's going to be a big reminder for the prospect himself that he needs to buy. And that's going to be a huge wild card for you to remind to the prospect at the end of the call why they should go right now instead of thinking about it. And what's the other thing? The point B, the heaven island, where the person wants to go. What we want to know, what is the goal, okay, of being there? What is the goal? What is the emotional attachment to that goal? Okay, because we are emotional beings, you know, everything is tied to emotions, okay? And we want to future pace that outcome and understand how the person is going to feel. And we want to ask the question of what if? Very important. What if that is not going to happen? And that's another thing. We talk about the good stuff, we bring the joy and happiness into our conversation, and then we need to understand what is going to happen if prospect is not going to increase the closing ratio by 5%. If you're not going to save the marriage, as we talked in the previous chapter, and based on those questions, you will have a full clarity on your prospect whether they're actually ready to move. Because if they don't have why now and what ifs, and they're like, nothing, that's going to be okay, I'm going to be good, I'm going to be fine. Well, whose that decision is? Yours. And if you're fine with that, well, maybe my solution is not the right one for you. So if you are already in high ticket sales, or you are thinking, okay, I'm going to start with this price, and what's going to be the next step, you know, how I should consider increasing my price, and what's going to be my future business, how much I can where I can take that, you know. So, and this is one of the formulas that we learned from one of our mentors this year, or it was in the previous year. Eventually there's a pretty a logical mathematical formula how you can do that, and that goes around a 60%. Okay, so let's imagine you're just starting with your a high-ticket coaching business, and you're charging 1,900. Okay, this pricing looks good. I'm not going to tell you the science between knocking off 100 euros, not making that $2,000. You know, it's easier for the prospect to, you know, consume this price instead of $2,000. But this is not the conversation about the fact that you need to have those nines in your pricing, but about the way of when you increase the price. So what you need to do, you need to take a look at all of your payments. Okay, all of the payments that came in, let's imagine there was like a 10 payments coming in from your prospect, majority of them was a full pays, people was just paying like 1900 straight from the bat, maybe some split payments. So what does it say when you do all of the calculations and you take the average percent of how much money was paid up front, and if that's above, it's a green, it's a yes, it's an indicator that your prospects can actually pay more. If they're always paying more than 60%. So what you should do in this case, you can bump up another 500 on your pricing, and that's going to be 2,400 for your service, and you can continue selling that. If that's not the case and your upfront cash collected rate is a lot less than 60%, but people is still committing for that and they're actually making the payments as it's in the agreement, then you definitely should be looking of how the closer is actually, or the person who's making a deal is actually closing that deal. Because maybe by changing just the wording, just the approach of how you close the deal, you can get more money up front into the business to actually use that money to grow the business. And as soon as this price gets above 60% collection ratio, you can add that on top of there another 500, and your new price is going to be 2,900. Hey guys, and the last thing here in this video, guess what? I'm changed. This is another day because previously my mic's battery died, so we'll need to refilm it and stick together the video. So how to collect more money up front from the customers. I'm giving you 3 tactics that I know that we have been using so far. So first and the most easiest one is by asking more money up front. And the reason behind that is because sometimes we just throw all of our options at the prospect, you know, giving them the best opportunities to choose from. And what you can do, instead of like saying that you have an upfront payment method, just say that most of your clients do pay upfront all of the money, and that's going to give you a possibility of actually dragging in at least more than you were doing before. And that actually works because one of the prospects, one of the clients of ours actually did it. And guess what? He had the clients who were like double paying him, and he said, does just this simple phrase, and people started paying him upfront. The next thing is no discount, okay? So, and this is something that I actually have heard a couple of weeks ago, referring back to the top G, Mr. Hormozy, so there was one time when the guy wanted to purchase the coaching from him, and he said, oh, okay, it's going to be like a 50,000 for a day. And the guy said, what about 35? And Hormozy replied to that, what about 75 for the coaching? And they met in the middle back to the price of the 50. So yeah, and that is one of the ways. But when somebody asks us for a discount, we just don't give it. And well, that's it, in period, you know, when you stand for the price at that particular spot. And the last thing is asking for more. So eventually there's this psychological stuff, you know, when somebody is committing to something, but as soon as they open their wallet, like theoretically, and gave you some money, like basically to make the transaction, they've actually overcame a huge barrier that they had in front of them to actually make the purchase and make the commitment. And as soon as that is done, it's much easier, you know, to put your hand in the wallet. It's easier for the prospect to get more money out of that. So as soon as you close the deal with your client and he pays anything up front, you can either suggest at that particular spot in the meeting with the client after he paid the, I don't know, first transaction or his deposit, by just saying, hey, buddy, so we are already over the fence. Well, maybe let's make a commitment and let's make it rock and roll, you know, with all of the boats loaded, you know, with all of the payment. And that might fly. In my particular experience, I haven't done it at all. But what I have done, I have conducted the calls to my prospects next day after the meeting, a week after the meeting, after I've collected the payment, and I propose them something extra, a little bit on top, to actually have the all amount of the money being processed at that particular spot. And that actually worked well, and the client paid the rest, and suddenly, even though they didn't have the money a week ago, they found the money to process the payment. So, and eventually for this video, that's going to be it. Hopefully you're going to like these things that I mentioned so far. I hope you're going to use them for your closing calls and for your business. And if not, well, share in the comments.